Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban, and this is episode number 56 of the podcast for January 6, 2009. I want to wish a happy new year to everybody. Have a lot of exciting podcasts ahead, including today's episode with John Shook, who is a senior advisor with the Lean Enterprise Institute and was one of the first Americans to work in depth with Toyota. So he has quite an expansive knowledge of the Toyota production system. He's the author of, this is going back a few years now, the book Learning to See about value stream mapping, and is most recently the author of another book published by the Lean Enterprise Institute called Managing to Learn, which is about the A3 problem-solving process, A3 reports, the A3 management system. So we're going to be talking about that today. If you have any feedback or questions for John, you can send them to me, or you can now interact with John at his own blog, which can be found at lean.org/shook, S-H-O-O-K. And all of this will be in the show notes, and hopefully we'll be interacting with John here on future podcasts. As always, thanks for listening. Well, once again, our guest today is John Shook. John, thanks for taking time out and joining us on the Lean Blog podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here.
Well, it's an exciting time right now. Your new book, Managing to Learn, is out and available. I was wondering if you could tell us, some of the story behind the book, what the inspiration was, and what some of the main lessons you hope a reader would get out of the book.
Well, simple question, I guess. Actually, I could talk about the story behind the book for probably too long. Amazingly, I actually feel kind of okay about it now, and I'm usually pretty critical of work. But now that it's done, not only does it feel good, of course, you've written yourself, Mark, and so it always feels good to get it done.
Yeah.
But it took a while. I probably actually worked on this for, fairly steadily, off and on for 2 years. And probably first talked with Jim Womack, the publisher, about it, closer to 3 or 4 years ago. But I was very hesitant. I mean, actually, it goes back to Learning to See. If you remember the book Learning to See that we came out with 10 years ago, my co-author, Mike Rother. Even then, I was kind of a reluctant participant, really. It wasn't my idea to do that book. It was really Mike's, and then also the publisher, Jim and Dan Jones, really wanted to do it. And I was even concerned then about, when you roll out a tool, it's not like there weren't already a lot of tools out there. If you go back to looking at SPC or looking at the old TQ, a lot of the old TQM stuff, it becomes something that's mandated and becomes a check-the-box exercise, and it becomes corporate wallpaper. I was a little worried about that with value stream mapping, but that was so different. And as we came up with the title of Learning to See, then I agreed that really it was a good idea, so that was that story 10 years ago. And then when Jim Womack wanted to do a book about the A3. I was even more worried because how almost all the lean tools are deceptively simple. They're simple on the surface, but there's more meaning as you get into them, And that's more true of the A3 than anything, because the tool itself is nothing. It is just a blank piece of paper that you use to tell us a story. So you can tell a story small or big on one sheet of paper. And it's so easy then just to do that. I was very concerned about a book about it, that it would become just another thing where people use it as a check-the-box exercise. And in fact, doing storyboards or 6-panel storyboards have been around for a long time. People have done that. So I was concerned about that. And so I thought about it and decided that I would only do it if I could somehow tell the story from a couple of perspectives. Both someone learning how to write an A3 or go through the A3 PDCA process, but then also the other side, of someone who is mentoring a learner as they were going through that process. If I could tell both of those stories, then it could have some value. Because in fact, this A3, the A3 was very important to all the work that I learned when I joined Toyota back 25 years ago. So it's not that I didn't see the value and it could be important, but I wanted to make sure the deeper story got out there as well. So you can learn to write an A3 in a day. but learning to use it as a management process is something that takes longer. So through some of the little trial and error, we came up with this idea. I said, what if we told two stories just parallel, two columns side by side? And we weren't worried that readers would be able to deal with that, and so there were counter proposals, and a lot of people said, well, maybe it should be just sequential. You tell one, the learner's story, and then at the end, at the end of the chapter, you tell the other person's story or something. But I really wanted it to be more dynamic than that, so we actually, kind of did a rapid prototype of one chapter to see how it would work, and sent it around. And I don't think, Mark, you received that early draft. But it was very early just to kind of see if it would work doing it that way. And I really liked the idea. I was very comfortable with it. And with the idea that it could actually capture what the title says, which is what we're doing is managing to learn. And there's a double meaning there.
Yeah.
That's as managers, we are trying to manage a learning process. And the other thing is we all as individuals are trying every day to kind of manage to learn through as we stumble through the work issues that face us every day. So if it could do that and tell the story, from two perspectives, a learner or a mentee and a mentor or boss, then I thought it could have some value. And so that's kind of the story behind the book. And through that, with liberal use of some sidebars to tell some of the conceptual pieces, and just show one person actually creating an A3 from beginning to end, we decided to use a non-manufacturing process. So that was sometimes I still wonder if that was the best thing to do. But there's so many people who still see, Lean as purely a factory floor kind of thing. It seemed to be an opportunity to go outside of that. Yeah. Because, a lot of the work in companies does take place with people working on projects, planning projects, getting bigger things together to move an organization forward than just what takes place on the plant floor. Although that's, the Gemba is where we want to focus things. So I'm hoping that people can see then that it is an overall process, and we kind of coined the term the A3 management process to emphasize it is not just a piece of paper, but there's a process there that can enable you to do a lot of things. That's assuming that you want to do those lot of things, which means solving problems, but also gaining agreement in the organization, mentoring people, leading people. If you want to manage in the way that I saw as a effective way of managing at Toyota, then the A3 can be an enabler. It's no guarantee of success, but it can be an enabler. So that was kind of some of the inspiration. LEI wanted an A3 book, and I only wanted to do it if I could present it kind of in a way that would embody the broader management context, and I think it manages to do both. Hope so. I guess we'll have to let readers let us know, how it succeeds.
Yeah, I mean, as just the one reader sitting here, the two-column format, I mean, it certainly lends a very rich story to sort of try to get in the head of both sides of student-teacher. It took a little getting used to, the flipping back and forth, because I tend to read a couple pages and then go back and sort of make it semi-sequential myself. But it is a really unique method. I mean, I can't imagine the challenge of trying to get complex concepts where typically, as the story says, somebody is coaching you, and it's very interactive, and a book is decidedly non-interactive, linear. Right. I could see the challenge in that, but
I appreciate that you appreciate the challenge. Because I will give myself a good grade for effort anyway. For execution, you and others will have to give the grade. But it is complex actually to tell the two stories running parallel side by side. I've never seen another book like it. I expected more people to kind of push, I don't know about complain, but at least to complain about the difficulty, I guess, of reading it. But really, it hasn't come up much. But I really like the dynamism of it. I mean, when you go to the plant floor, or when you go to walking down the hallway at work, I mean, sometimes two people speak to you at once. I mean, life doesn't actually come at you in a linear fashion, as you said, which a book is by nature kind of linear. And what we've done in this case is try to show a little bit more of that dynamic nature. I mean, so you do have a choice here to read the left column first or the right column first. But that's just like when two people yell at you at the same time. You have to choose. Okay, am I going to talk to you first or you first? And I think people are finding what you did, which is that you read a couple of pages and you find a way to read it that's comfortable to you.
Yeah. And I really do find the whole A3, the formal A3 methodology and thinking process to be fascinating, because I can't claim personally to be an expert on the A3 methodology as it's laid out. I've never worked in an organization like Toyota that directly used that, but as someone with some experience with Lean, I certainly recognize a lot of the thought process and the elements and the concepts behind the A3 document. But one question I was going to ask, and for my own learning, and I would assume some of the listeners, what tips do you have to make sure that it's not just a document, like you said, corporate wallpaper? That I've been in some training classes where the form is so deceptively simple, but sometimes it seems to almost get presented or put together in kind of a superficial way. What tips do you have for people to make sure that they're really incorporating kind of the lean thinking, Toyota management thought process into the document instead of just filling out a check the box type format?
I think the first thing is to kind of take your last statement there and revisit the purpose of what we're doing here. If you're actually using the A3 because you want to manage in a way that embodies those principles that we're aware of. I mean, everyone would love to be the best lean leader, lean manager we could ever be. We would all love to be, whether it's Taiichi Ohno or someone whose leadership I've had a chance to witness over the years, Mr. Cho, the current chairman of Toyota. And we all can't be that so easily. But if that's what we want to aspire to, a way that we're developing people, we're actually getting people to solve problems, we're moving the organization forward, we're taking the organization in the direction we want. If we use the A3 as a way to help us achieve that, then we can, keeping our eye on that purpose, then we can hopefully prevent then the tendency to focus on it as a tool itself. Now, you said how can you make sure that doesn't happen? I don't know if there's a way to make sure it doesn't happen, except that's, again, the way we structured the book is certainly, I think, it doesn't represent the notion that the point is filling in the blanks, filling in the boxes. The other thing is, and I put this little small chapter toward the end there that we call it kind of getting started, and that it takes 2 to A3. And you could say, so that tries to give some hints about how to use it as a process. And if you build in the discipline in the beginning, that the focus isn't just someone writing a good A3, although that's a key piece of it. We can begin teaching ourselves in the beginning that there are different roles involved in the A3 as a process, and that's why I'm calling it a process. So when I work with an organization to bring in the A3 is to add into their suite of lean tools or management tools, we always practice 3 different roles. And the first is the writer, the author. And that's how you write an A3. If you want to decide there's 6 boxes, or I think maybe it's 7 in the A3 that's in the book, then that's fine. So you begin to go through a thinking process of defining the problem, what you're talking about, defining what's important about that from the company standpoint, what's the business context. Then what are the current conditions? Let's actually go out to the Gemba and see what's happening. Then decide, okay, that's how things are happening. What are our goals? How do we want things to look? And analyze that gap between the way things are and the way we want them to be. Then go through the discipline of actually eliciting a set of ideas, of countermeasures, of proposals, not just jumping to one solution. Because one of the things Lean is not is jumping to a conclusion, jumping to a solution. And once we've gone through all that, then put in our plan, a real timeline, so we can see what needs to happen, we expect to happen by when, and our follow-up ideas. So the first thing is to learn how to do that, how to construct an A3 that tells that sort of story. And whether you do that in 5 boxes or 7 boxes, I think can be flexible. Many companies find it convenient, especially in the beginning, to make a standard template. I'm always skeptical of standard templates for something like that, only because that tends to lean toward that tendency to see it as a fill-in-the-box exercise, if you do that. The second thing then is, as part of kind of training or learning this, is in addition to learning to write an A3, be the author, the next thing is you have to actually present it. You use it to tell a story. And so we'll actually practice this. We'll role play this, where you actually take your A3 and present it to someone. And the third role, which is so very important, is the other side. So once someone is presenting an A3 to you, how do you respond? And there are different ways that someone can respond. A lot of times the traditional, leadership management response is to disagree, to say, no, that's not right, here's what's right, and to give someone the answer. And we can use this format then as a way to stop ourselves from doing that. First of all, to ask some questions to ensure, first of all, that I understand the A3 that's being presented to me. Second of all, to say, okay, does the person who's presenting this A3 to me, does he or she actually understand his or her problem? And if they have understood the problem, that leads us down a path now of okay, now let's examine the root cause and the possible proposals. But very often they haven't actually identified the root cause. And the A3 becomes a platform then that I can use to help that person see that they haven't actually gone to the Gemba and haven't actually asked why 5 times or 10 times, however many times they need to get to the root cause. So in the very beginning of training that I would do for the A3, I include those 3 roles in the very beginning. So we don't just practice writing them, but we practice also using them as a communication tool and practice the other side, which is responding. Because, again, it always takes at least 2 to A3. It sounds kind of catchy, I suppose, but I think it's really true.
Yeah, and the Managing to Learn, I think, does a good job of representing that back and forth process, which again seems familiar to other lean methods like Hoshin Conry and this back and forth
right
learning and problem solving style. But one thing that jumps out, and you see this in the book, the left hand column character having to go back and rework his A3 and being challenged and go back and erasing and working on it again. And I've heard people say sometimes, it took me 10 tries, 10 attempts at an A3. It just kind of makes you think, wow, do people really have patience for that? What kind of feedback do you get from people about the back and forth nature of the process?
Well, one thing is, I think, again, only if you decide you want to manage this way are you going to be able to do that. So, but if you've decided that I'm in an organization where people are jumping to conclusions, they're jumping to solutions all the time. We have hammers running all over the place looking for nails. We have a lot of activity going on by maybe a lot of well-intentioned people, but we're working on the wrong things. And no matter what we do, it doesn't seem to take the organization forward. If you think that those problems are in place, then what that means is we need to learn how to go through a more rigorous thinking process to understand truly what's happening at the Gemba, understand why it's happening, to root cause. And then we can be able to understand how all the different countermeasures and great ideas we have might or might not match up and link against the real problems of the day, the real things that we want to fix. If you recognize that, then you'll actually appreciate the fact that the A3 makes you slow down. The fact that you have those boxes there, it becomes then easy. And again, this as you know, it occurs in the example in the book, where in the first instance, the learner jumps to a solution, and feels fairly proud of it, I suppose. And then the mentor goes back and says, no, we're going to stop. We're going to go through this step by step. And having the A3 as a process to help you do that can enable us to together go through the process and can help build in that kind of a discipline of patience. We'd all like to be able to go, know the root cause immediately, and know what would be the best solution to move forward against that root cause right away. But what we're going to do is not make assumptions and not manage by a wish list, but actually ensuring that we understand the situation and moving through things in a disciplined fashion. So if that's what you want to do, then I think that can happen. It is a cultural change, though, in many cases. And it's not something that you can do effectively just by yourself. You can start by yourself, but then you want to start use this and start engaging others. And so we're all going through this kind of a standard thinking process together.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like it would be challenging to start from scratch with a process like this, maybe on the one level, because it requires this mentor back and forth. If you're an individual who doesn't have a good mentor to help you with the process, like you said, it takes 2. It seems like you might end up with superficial A3s or not accomplishing much. And maybe the second challenge might be, if somebody is working in a big, large corporation that sounds like the opposite of what you described. A lot of organizations aren't very patient. by nature. They want to jump to solutions. The boss has all the answers. Type organization. This may not. I mean, this may be too advanced of a methodology for somebody who's maybe real early in a lean journey. Is that fair to say, or am I being?
Well, I don't know that I would say it exactly that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be a tool that you can bring in from the very beginning. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, I'm a believer that you can really start from many places in many different ways along the lean journey. I think eventually, though, what we want is an organization where people are having dialogues, where they're getting engaged, where leaders are developing their people. And this can be, a tool that can enable that. It also can be, in the beginning, that's just often in the beginning stages used as a pretty simple, straightforward problem-solving tool. And you're not going to get anywhere, as you know, in any lean initiative unless we are learning to problem solve. I mean, lean problem solving is at the core of what we're doing. So bringing in any lean tool in the absence of bringing along with it a focus on what is a problem and how do we solve it, I think is going to fail. So this can be one. So in the early stages, rather than very complicated organizational change sorts of proposal A3s, they can be centered around solving more simple problems, bringing into play the lean problem-solving tools that really are the essence of standardized work in Kaizen. That's what standardized work in Kaizen is. It's a way to see how things are and how to from that determine problems and how to make improvements. So I think it can come in from the very beginning. The other thing I like about it from a flexibility standpoint is that someone, no matter if you're the CEO or you're a manager or an area manager in the plant floor or you're in engineering, you can start to use this for yourself. The individual, through writing an A3 and going through the discipline of going through the questions and going through the thinking steps, will become a stronger problem solver, even if you just do this on your own. To this day, sometimes when I sit down and write one, I'll always be surprised at how forcing myself to go through the discipline of working on an A3, I'll recognize connections between things I thought I should do and how they connect or don't connect versus the real situation or the real problem. So I think as an individual, there's a lot that can be gained, and as an organization as well. And I think you can start to use it even at earlier stages of a lean journey. I think the use of it is simpler. But I think that's true of any lean tool. When we begin, we try to use them in a simple fashion, and then learn about them as we go along, and learn that we can use them in different, more complex situations.
Okay, well that's good. That dials back some of my, I guess, cynicism. I think it's a good message. It sounds like you're saying that, if anything, I guess like anything, start small.
Absolutely. And you mentioned two words a moment ago. You mentioned problem solving, and in the same sentence you mentioned Hoshin Kanri as well. The thing is, if you have a broad or want to start a broad corporate-wide Hoshin Kanri initiative, you need A3 as part of that. But also when you go down to the very front lines of problem solving, which I think, again, you have to have, and is usually an important place to start, the A3 can structure that as well. It allows you to structure and tell your problem solving stories around a standard kind of a story template. And then what it enables you to do then is hook them up, hook your frontline problem solving activities that are structured around PDCA in with your broader Hoshin Kanri activities as well. So if you're working at a more of a broader company transformation level, it can be part of that. But also it can be just something at the front lines, just one person or a small group of people can do as well. Mm-hmm. That's the thing about Hoshin Kanri. You can't do that so easily with a small group. That means you're talking about how the company develops its strategies and works through them. Yeah. With the A3, though, you can do it starting at any level.
Okay. Well, and I would love to dig into this more. Maybe we can do a follow-up conversation after more people have had a chance to read your book. I know I've talked to others who have either started reading or completed reading it, so maybe if there's questions, people can contact us and we can do a follow-up discussion.
Sure.
Or one other way, and I don't know how interactive this has been so far, I've noticed you started doing a column, or it's actually being done in the construct of a blog on the LEI website. So I was wondering how that's going so far, and has it been interactive, and is it the John Shook newsletter? It's coming out weekly, right?
Yeah. Partly as I started getting toward the end of the book, Managing to Learn, I wanted to keep it concise, the book, and I don't know how many pages it ended up being, but I wanted to keep it, fairly concise and focused. But there were a lot of other things I realized I had to say. There were notes, scraps of paper all over the desk, and a lot of things that were kind of unused. And I started thinking more and more that I wouldn't mind kind of an alternative means of getting those ideas out there, but also, hopefully getting a dialogue started about this, because I do think management and leadership are so very key to what we're talking about. And if you look at so many lean initiatives that have not succeeded the way that they could, you have to look at leadership and management issues as being central to that. So I think there's a dialogue that needs to be taking place out there. And blogging, I think you've done a great job, Mark, as a few others have, of bringing blogging into the lean dialogue. I was a little scared of it. I haven't read that many blogs, really. And so what we're calling it's just a corner in the LEI website, and we're calling it John's Lean Management column is what we're calling it. And so it's kind of somewhere in between, like a traditional magazine column and a blog, I suppose. And it didn't really solicit a whole lot of feedback the first couple of times, but I think talking with you and reading your blog, I'm kind of getting a little more comfortable with the idea. I think it's a great new venue, really, for exchanging ideas and getting ideas out there. It's exciting. But I'm just kind of slowly getting used to the idea and dipping my toe in the water. But so far it's been fun. We've just done a few, but every week I'm planning on just putting one column out there, and we'll see how people respond.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I've linked to it off of my website. People listening can go to www.lean.org/shook and find the columns there. So that's a nice addition to the Lean web world, and welcome to words like this will start rolling off your tongue. Words like blogosphere and weird. Welcome to the blog. I don't even like saying that. Welcome to the blogosphere, John. But thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you more so for your continued sharing of your learning back to Toyota days and everything you've been doing since. I really learn a lot from it, and I know others do. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Mark, and I look forward to your ongoing hand-holding as I get used to the blogosphere and everything. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us again today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.